Laura!
Me! Hi!
Laura K. Buzz, Laura Kate Dale.
Yeah, the Laura K. Buzz in all of the places, because I've got that good unified branding. It's me, hello, I'm here.
How is the unified branding? Are you ever just thankful for it? Like you just wake up in a cold sweat and you're like, oh god, I got all the handles on every platform.
Anytime I work with anyone else who has to do the I'm this on this, but I'm this on this, I'm like, the sweet freedom of having a really specific username that came out of like a very nonsense reason.
Bullet dodged there, but for the grace of God go I. Beautiful. We are not recording these crew gunks in any specific order. I just try to grab whoever's available, but I'm really glad we waited until after the Riddle Snake arc for you, especially because it's got so much juice here. I can't imagine having you gone first, and you're like, I'm big.
Yeah, no. That arc was where I got to really just play around with what's interesting about religion, and the good juicy shit.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about that. So let's just get right into it. I have a list here of supporters of the show. So I'm going to say this first question is sponsored by Faith and Valor. This is for Brunch, Austin Tiene El Abuelo, and Joseph Tombrello. The question is, where did Barbella come from?
So, Barbella came from a couple of different things. I've wanted to play a religious character for a while because, I grew up religious. I grew up in a Christian church through from young childhood up to late teens, early adulthood, and it's one of those things where if you spend a long time in life religious and then not being religious, that you have a lot of opinions about religion. And I've wanted to work out how to do a paladin character at some point to fuck around with religion stuff. But I wanted something that wasn't going to be too heavy. I didn't want to get into, the depressing bits of religion, but I wanted to play around in that space. And the Riddlefish was just this perfect little confluence of events where I was like, oh, that's a deity where I can mesh. I have thoughts about religion alongside a lifetime of growing up with a dad that wrote pantomimes and therefore a head full of really, really terrible wordplay. And smush them together, you got Fish Lady.
It's been a ton of fun. I mean, I can tell you do a lot of research for your riddles. You're always on the ball. For the audience, I think I've said a couple times on air, oh, I didn't edit that. How long Laura took to answer the riddle. You're already got it when I'm halfway through. All of that is actually in the call, which I feel like it might be hard to believe that that's how it was recorded. So it's really impressive seeing you do your thing.
I absolutely just love stupid puns and stupid wordplay, and my having an excuse to be I can't plan ahead for what's going to happen in the show, so I can't plan ahead character choices terribly far because who knows what's going to happen and what people are going to do. Riddles are one thing where I can go, I've got a pretty good feeling this arc is going to touch on these topics, or just a story in the water is going to touch on these topics. Let's just have keyword riddles ready.
Yeah, I've noticed that too, throwing riddles back at you, that if you just Google, riddles about farms or riddles about fighting or whatever, you just find some people have done that work for some reason. I don't know exactly what the riddle ecosystem is like, the publishing industry about that stuff, but
possibly
it's out there.
It's out there, but you sometimes come across a keyword where you'll have a page like that and every single riddle on the page is the same one riddle. They word it differently, but they only have one punchline and they decided still to make a page out of it.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of flows into our next question. I'll say sponsored by Simon Lee, Conduit of Chungus, Bearer of Dinkus, Minion of John Con, Extellaris, and Concept Champion of the Crab Salute. How does this compare to your character you previously played, a cleric named Vindros, who had a slightly different take on religion? Have you been deliberately trying to contrast that, or is it just you're 100% focused on riddles? What is the difference between a cleric and a paladin and your approach between these two characters?
To me, the way that I played Vindros was much more devotion to the one holy figure, and much less concerned with overall doctrine. I think it's very easy to have religion and cults have a lot of overlap in that sense of I mean in that sense of it's very easy to have a charismatic figurehead that becomes almost more of a focus of your devotion than the belief structure itself. And I think very much Vindros was at least initially came from a place of you are one figure who I am devoted to, as opposed to I wanted Barbella to be a lot more questioning, exploring person within a religion who is like knee deep in the scripture, who is interpreting like, yeah, look, I'm failing, but that's part of the journey of studying theology. But also very specifically going back a few seasons before that, what was the name of the Hierophant character that was religious from the season that Nifix was in?
Oh, Lancelot the Hollyphant.
Yes, exactly. Lancelot the Hollyphant was a specific reference point I had when making Barbella, because like the whole like character conflict against Lancelot was not being able to being allowed to have space to have questions about religion, and I wanted to have a character who was the antithesis of that in terms of being someone who knows that they don't know everything about their religion and that doesn't think their religion is above questioning or that their religion is above having an evolving understanding of. And that's, I think, what's the space I was trying to find for Barbella.
Oh, I'm so glad I asked that because that's fascinating. I deliberately made Lancelot like a really nice guy with like a toxic belief, so it's kind of made it hard to swallow the rest of his personality. And so you having a much healthier approach. Yeah, it's a quote unquote religion, but really you're just like asking questions and like trying to commune with the mysteries of the universe, which is I think is a healthy and interesting character.
It's even as someone who isn't personally religious myself anymore, it's the thing that I kind of miss about religion is the point in it where I was in that space where it felt like there was room to explore those questions and to go, maybe we've misunderstood a piece of text and maybe there is more interpretations than what the page appears to say. And again, that just works really nicely with riddles, where it is deliberately a religion about there is no one clear answer to this. The meaning of this might be obfuscated somewhat. The point of the religion is to try and find meaning, and you might come to a different answer because there might be more than one punchline to a riddle.
This has been feeding back into Dry Team. I think last episode we had an extended conversation where Hylia was trying to say like, the tree religion and the riddle religion are just about their lenses to see the universe. They're not doctrine. They're not like a list of rules that if you break you get bathed in hellfire, which is like a really kind of creepy approach to the world. It's just like, hey, what's going on over there? Let's think about it together. And yeah I like it.
The holy book of riddles that Barbella uses, there is a very specific thing I used to do within Christianity that like feeds into how I thought about that book, which was the practice of I have a question about what to do in life that I don't know what to do, and I don't know a bit of scripture that's going to be helpful. Open the Bible on a random page and pick a random paragraph and see if there's a way to interpret it in a way that feels like an answer. And, like, that is very much what the riddle book is for Barbella. It is that sort of using religious text as something, somewhat of a lens to find your own answers in. And, like, I certainly don't think there is anything wrong with religion that has, like, this is the specific answer to what these questions are, but that feels like it leaves no room for exploration, which is just not how... It's just not what I find interesting about religion.
It's incredible how it's worked out with the spell augury, where you like use a random riddle to like foretell the future. There's a huge chance that the few times we've done that, it just should have been nonsense, and it's pretty much worked out. And I mean, we do that stuff. That's kind of like the dice funk trick. Yeah. Like when we just do something that shouldn't work, and it just comes out beautifully. I don't know how we manage it.
There's a reason I've not overused that, because I'm like, it's worked so far and it's beautiful when it works, and I don't want to roll the dice too many times that we can't find an applicable riddle.
Yeah, that would be a big bummer. Let's go to the next question, though. Level 10 cleric Caroline hands you a chick track full of dogmatic anti-library propaganda, lime, and eardrum espresso. So you came to the table with Barbella's kind of basic concept. How did that survive the first contact with the enemy, as they say, or the crab arc? How did Barbella kind of take in what was going on there, and how did that influence how you began to play her? Because the first arc is really about finding your character.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. That first arc, I was trying to find, I think, the line between how much I play into the religion angle versus how much I play into lovable dumbass. Because I know when I initially came up with the character, like a big bullet point on the character was himbo or herbo. Big muscles, not much going on upstairs. And that first arc, like, I think about things like the walking around in literal circles following the smell of the crab leg that she's got rested on her own arm, is like,
Yeah.
you play around with stuff like that and work out whether that is what is actually interesting with a character, and I think it helped that the second arc was so focused on the riddlefish religion, because it gave me a much stronger sense of the wider theology that allowed me to sort of go, I don't have to as much rely on that as a crutch. Because that is the stuff that's like, it's not my style to come into a season with like, here is my 15 pages of notes about like my entire religion fleshed out in advance. But working through that stuff in real time, and I think particularly with like the second arc having another member of the religion to interact with, changed a lot of those things. Because again, I think arc 1 was very much, I knew the thing is riddles, and I knew big muscle, not a thinker, but I didn't expect Barbella to be as invested as quickly in the social aspects of that first arc, and I'm glad that that first arc settled the way it did, where I didn't want her to come across as too pushy on others of her own religion, and trying to walk that line of, I'm bringing it up to try and engage with it, but also not in a way that is going to put off building bonds with other characters. And yeah, I think that was the thing I was trying to rummage through in that first arc.
Part of the original idea of the season was like we would do vibe checks on the dry team, and the wet team would be bringing people to the well of resurrection. So it'd be like parallel, back and forth, back and forth. And then I thought like that is too strict. That's like too rigid. And so I literally thought of the crab arc as like, what if I just let them goof around in a trench for a little bit, specifically so that, yeah, that kind of interaction could happen. I'm glad it worked out that way, because I worry if we had started with the Riddle Snake arc, which I really liked, and we're going to talk about that next, that it wouldn't have given that space for kind of to just like, with the bumpers on, to just see what was going on there.
I very much think, had we started with the Riddlefish arc, I think a lot of the initially planned elements of Barbella would have like really gotten buried. I think that first arc gave room for her to exist before fleshing out the religion, which I think, again, is helpful to not have a character's religion be the entirety and totality of who they end up being.
Yeah, I agree. Let's go to the next question. C.A. Little, Christman finally changing his Patreon name, and Nephis Decidia, the queer sheep, filled with compersion, introduced some partners to each other, went great. Congratulations. Asks, what about the Riddle Snake arc? That was kind of a Barbella starring role. I try to let everyone get a hand on the ball, but because of your, connection with the setting, it really felt like you came to the forefront, and you had a lot of development and a lot of really interesting, interactions. So I was so excited about this, and I think it went great. So how do you feel it's influenced your character and your thoughts about how, everything's going?
The thing I really liked about that arc was getting to put her religion, her study of theology as a competent practical skill up front. Because I think that first arc very much was, hey, hey, silly goof, she worships silly little word puzzles. But the way that it panned out, I think, lent a lot of weight to, no, this is a real thing. In a world where there are very few, if any, gods remaining, this does seem to be a deity that, like, there is a reason why she worships, and there is method to the things she practices, and being an arc where she got to show the people she was working with, hey, this thing that, like, I had a majestic experience and I can't quite put words to, you've seen it firsthand. You've seen the awe-inspiring thing that this is. Even if you don't, have the same belief as I do you see why someone would be so overwhelmed by the presence of this that they would believe?
I literally
And
checked in on Reaper and was like, "Hey, are you converting? Because you just, Reaper solved that big climactic riddle and slam
I,
dunked the body part." I was like, "This is incredible for you too."
yeah, it's one of those things where, like, even with Reaper not converting in that moment or anything, I think it was a bonding moment of, this isn't just nonsense. There is a reason why I care about this, and it was particularly nice, I think, Reaper getting to have a hand on the ball at the end there, and getting to have that moment of, there is a logic to this, and if you think about it in the right way, there is power in exploring this and creating an understanding of, like, oh, I get what your religion means to you, even if it's not for me, is just a really nice experience to be able to explore. Also, I'm so glad that arc did not. The dice tell the story, and sometimes you have a string of botches at the worst possible moment, and it completely derails a character's story, and you have to just kind of roll with the story the dice are telling. I am so glad that Barbella got to be competent in this arc, because I don't know what I would have done with Barbella completely and utterly fails at every turn to demonstrate that her religion works. I'd have rolled with it, but I don't know that it would have been the story that I'd have been interested in telling.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing this for almost 10 years now, and I feel like, pretty much every time we've gotten an unexpected result, we've been able to roll with it. But this is the one where, the result I would have written as, like, fiction came out. Because you both got the riddle success, which kind of validated your beliefs, and you did have the kind of going down in combat, which is a meaningful and interesting kind of wrinkle that you have to work through. Where we just released the second downtime, so there's still more to talk about with that. But I also found that kind of a not mistake, just an oopsie was like a really good moment for her because she was on such a hot streak.
Yeah, and I think she was definitely riding that hot streak a little. She was riding a little bit of overconfidence in the, I've so rarely had an opportunity to show this stuff off. And I think definitely a little bit of, as we sort of starting to explore around this point in the story, this idea of Barbella is a little overeager and thinks before she acts sometimes, or acts before she thinks, and um, it was nice to have a moment of competence to go, whatever things are yet to come where maybe Barbella's recklessness doesn't pan out, that there is a reason why she has faith, and there's a reason, you can sort of see that, like, when religion is at her back and things are working well and she's just sort of going on blind faith and it is working out, how that could lead to someone who is maybe a little not used to stopping and thinking. Because her religion seems to demonstrably work, and so far it's carried her through without too much going wrong.
There's so much to talk about in this Riddlefish arc that I actually think I'm going to split this into even the next question, sponsored by Squishy Fishy, Marine Science Guy, and Brent, still every episode of Dice Funk Goatly. How do you feel about the end of that arc with the Coral Kingdom, because the original idea for that 3 episode arc was kind of a 310 to Yuma thing where you're chaperoning something from A to B while you're being attacked. But then Dryside went to a 4th episode, and so I added the kind of mini civil war where the two people come here fighting over the queen's body, and the climax of that was so tense with everyone in the church like yelling at each other, and it's just like I think I edited like maybe 20 or 30 minutes out of that conversation because it was just like it was so like in a good way like intense, and people had strong feelings, and it kind of came down to you making that decision. So do you have any thoughts with some distance, some hindsight?
I think that moment, particularly where Barbella just sort of steps in and takes a hold, I think is a moment I wouldn't have done if the arc hadn't gone the way it did. I think it was very much born out of that being on a hot streak, everything's working out, the power of the religion being seen, and not only not doubting herself, but not doubting her religion to work things out. And putting that kind of faith in and just sort of trusting it'll work is a thing that can, it can work in the moment, as demonstrably it did, but you then have to justify it in a way that is detached from the journey and the context that everyone else around was not there for.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that Barbella struggles with, is remembering not everyone has been present for every moment of her story, and that the things that feel obvious or inevitable to her aren't based on context that everyone will understand.
What do you think about the summoning the riddlefish there? Because I hadn't like planned for that to be revealed necessarily. I wanted you to have the ability to kind of call on the riddlefish, kind of as a contrast to the banyan tree, which is essentially defenseless. And so I wanted the other half of it to be like fully like capable of self-defense. But I didn't know you were going to start asking riddles in the church, and I was like, well, I think this is how this works, so we got to let it go. Was that a big surprise to you? Like, how is that influenced your thinking about the character?
1,000%. It was a big surprise. I think the thing in character about it is that I don't think Barbella would ever in 1,000 years have believed that that was going to be the consequence of the decision that was being made, because like I tried to pepper this in earlier on, that like the times where Barbella has tried to write her own riddles are shameful little accidents around the church on post-it notes. I think I've said on air that there is a lot of them that are based on a social media account called Kids Write Jokes, which are small children attempting to write jokes, and they're not very good. But like, I think in Barbella's head, she felt like she was much more of a I'm trying to work out how to put this. As someone that, like, was studying theology at one point in my life before, life took a different turn, there is this real sense that you can be in when you're someone who's really dedicated your life to religion, that there is so much you do not know, and that you barely deserve to be in the conversations with the kinds of people who you look up to religiously, because you feel like you are so far away from the people that have sort of been given positions of this person is near to religious significance. And for someone who was demonstrably trying to contribute to her religion and failing to do this fairly basic act of worship, I think she had a very different idea of how she was progressing through the religion and the power that she potentially held. And it's one of those things where, like, she's got access to magic as a paladin who worships a magical deity. There's clearly a degree of worship is being recognized, but I don't think Barbella really recognized, my devotion is measurably, practically being noticed by this deific figure. Um, I don't know what she thought was going to happen, but I think she was probably in the headspace more of maybe she was going to get a power up and glow and be able to like slightly more intimidate, like, I am very strong right now, go away. I don't think she realized, oh, the central figure of the religion is something that will answer me, which is not always a feeling that people within religion have, the feeling that you will get a direct, tangible response to your prayers to your religious figure.
There's a line you say in that episode, like, I think you're like two riddles deep, and you're like, well, I've already started this. Like, I kind of want to see how it plays out. Like, it kind of maybe tilted your thinking about the central question there, which, like, what people decide with. It was supposed to be kind of an even decision between monarchy, which I think we all agree is kind of a bad system, but with figures we kind of liked with Allison, and that you were told the queen was, like, personally nice. And then you have, like, the anarchist, which I think we all have a more positive association with, but with the seneschal who's like attacking people physically and a kind of off-putting, like personal approach is not good. So that was kind of the choice. And then it's like, well, I also want to see what my powers are doing.
Yeah,
so
like I think honestly for Barbella, like, this is part of playing into the. It was a tough moral choice, and Barbella did not feel equipped to make the decision between the two. But what she did feel equipped to do was to go, I'm calling out religiously and something seems to be answering. I trust in the religion. I trust that whatever this leads to, that is the correct answer. And again, I think that is, someone who is practicing like augury to find answers to questions. If it seems like God is there ready to go, I'll solve this. You put your faith in what that's going to lead to.
When I was editing that episode, I was thinking with hindsight what I would have done differently. I was thinking maybe have Allison catch up so she could defend her viewpoint or something. But then I didn't want it to be like, you basically have to choose which one of them to kill because you had so much more time with Allison. And I think that would have been much harder. I mean, you still went with, what you went with anyway. But yeah, I was in my head thinking about what I could have said different, what I could have done different. The way it came out is very fascinating, and it leads to a lot of consequences, which are going to color like the whole second half of the campaign.
It's my favorite. As much as I complain on air about consequences, I love consequences. I wouldn't do this stuff if I wasn't here for the juicy consequences. But like, I got to put up a show as if I don't want them.
I think Quinn said to me like years ago, she was like, if this was a show where there was a bad guys and we beat them up because they were bad, like I would have quit years ago. It's just like, that gets really boring. This is like
there's a choice from one of the earlier seasons that I think about a lot when I'm making suboptimal choices. And it was Leah Moira Melbeck agreeing to transport smuggled goods. And going like, I know this will result in negative consequences and problems to solve down the line. And that's kind of why I'm doing it. Because half the time I'm like, the most interesting answers come in roleplay, in my opinion, from when you dig yourself a hole and then have to dig yourself back out of it later. Like,
yeah.
But putting obstacles in your own way and then going, damn, I gotta jump over this obstacle now, it's where you find out what the character's made of.
Speaking of digging holes and consequences, the next question is going to really go well with this. We have a werewolf with 2 Palestinian flags in their hands, the space fighters, and finally, his name, just and finally, asks about the downtime scenes. So we're doing a new experiment this season where the downtime are player to player. We've never done that before. I'm going to split this into 2 because I think both of the scenes we've done so far that the audience has heard have been really juicy. So the first one was Barbella and Hialeah discussing the kind of nature of their relationships, if they're connected, how they're connected. And I'm bringing my own stuff to it. Like, you've been talking a lot about how your background is influenced influenced Barbella. Hialeah is very much a kind of reflection of me not being raised religious, but getting intensely interested in like college and like minoring in it, which is like it's like not quite the what do they say, the zeal of the convert, like, but like what did you get out of that kind of interaction, and how has it influenced how you play Barbella, or how Barbella thinks, to be met with this intense, weird, arrogant tree?
It's super interesting, particularly in the context of stuff that sort of comes to follow. In that the way in the moment that first downtime was happening, it's one of those things where Barbella didn't want to come across as someone who was dismissing someone else's approach to religion, but inherently the way that Hialeah treated religious belief was off-putting. And it was off-putting in the sense of, like, treating whatever your particular belief is as this sort of cavalier thing to very laissez-faire, make very self-centered interpretations around. And I wanted Barbella to be someone who would be open, like, very actively making an effort to be open to other people's approaches to religion, while having her, like, not erasing the fact that personally she's like, that's not how you do religion, and you're not the representative of this belief that I feel like I am ready to have deep theological conversations with. But again, I wanted her to be someone that came into this with a genuine interest in other people's approaches to belief. I think that she wants to be the kind of person that doesn't write off other people's beliefs as inherently less valid places to find answers. And again, making it riddle based was like, hey, sometimes the answer isn't what you thought it would be, it's somewhere else entirely, I think plays into that. But
I don't know why Hylia is such an asshole. I think it's just like I get into the mind space of the character, and it's like, if an otherworldly supernatural being literally gives me magic powers, how are you not going to be a little bit of an arrogant dick about it? It just feels like that's the like response people would have. And if anything, she's baffled that other people aren't like more reverent, It's just like in real life, in our world, people worship things that don't give them powers.
Yeah, well, I think the way to look at it is that Barbella is part of an established religion that had people who came before her, and like the way I see it is, I don't think Barbella's the first person to have gained access to magical power through the Riddlefish, and because there is an existing hierarchy of the religion there's this sort of sense for her that to become someone high up in a religion is something that requires study and work and moving through a chain of recognition, and that it almost feels like Hialeah came to this and was like, well, as the only person here, I'm in charge, I'm top of a religion. And I think Barbella comes to that with a view of, like, how arrogant do you have to be to think that you are, like, the Pope-esque figure of a religion that you've only just entered without doing all of the work that seemingly I am being expected, that is expected of me to do if I want to rise to that sort of position within an established religion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I kind of made that decision just because it didn't seem like Lillian or Stranger really were that invested. Like they don't really have any like emotional attachment to the tree, and I was like, someone needs to. That's the setting.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's curious because Boyce and Reaper don't have any particularly strong feelings about the Riddlefish, it seems, but you haven't really let that bother Barbella, or at least it has come through to me that you're like, hey, why don't you like my thing? Maybe you're just more secure. I guess Hylia is just a really insecure character, and Barbella is very secure, is what that is.
And again, like, going back to Lancelot, I very specifically wanted to play Barbella as someone who, like, was confident in her own religion. She was very self-assured in it. And that not being where the conflict was for her, it's that sense of someone who's putting a lot of work into understanding the understandable and coming up against someone who's just like, I'm just going to decide what all the answers are because I'm the only person around to be invested in this religion.
Mm.
Is, and like, I certainly don't think Barbella is opposed to that. I think it's just a coming to terms with the differences in perspective and the differences in approach to religion. Because I think at the end of the day, Barbella is just someone who deeply wants to understand belief in all its forms. It's why it makes an effort to keep on top of the multi-faith room in the central area. She wants belief to be the thing, because wherever you find your answers, hey, they're hard enough to find as it is.
You mentioned the multi-faith room. That is where the second downtime scene takes place, so we can move there. Sponsored by Chase Sterling. Tara is giving money to say hi to all the cats, and Egon Steiner. How did you feel about the Lillian scene, where you sneak attacked the poor dryad and all of that? That's pretty fun. How did that influence, your thinking about both of these characters and your continuing exploration of these themes?
So that has only just aired when we're recording this, right?
Yeah, that just went up.
Okay. I'll think about how best to put this then.
Yeah.
I think it was good for Barbella to have a space to talk that stuff through nice and quick after the Riddlefish arc ended. Because I think it would have been really easy for... Again, I think similar to that conversation we were just having about Hialeah, it would be really easy for someone to say, summon God on command, and get a real high and mighty sense of themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think it was really important to very quickly follow on the tails of that with I don't want to act that impulsively, given that I am now aware of the scale of consequences me being thoughtless could have. And I wanted it to be a wake-up call for Barbella of a moment, while, I think I can say this much, while not being something that would necessarily be easy to instantly put into practice. It's good to have the conversation about attitudes needing to change, but that Barbella is still inherently an impulsive person, and that lesson might not instantly be something that she's always good at practicing.
Before that scene, I hadn't really thought of Lillian and Barbella as like being foils, but hearing the two characters kind of talk, exchanging their anxieties about being impulsive and hesitant, respectively, I thought really sharpened my understanding of them.
It's a thing that, I didn't go into Barbella as a character thinking of impulsivity as a trait that I planned for, but it became obvious that was a thing. And in the time since, planning that downtime scene and recording it, I've been thinking about what it is I'm exploring with that. And I think for me it is exploring... As someone with ADHD who, I recognize I have caused fuck-ups in my own life at times by just being unmedicated and having a brain that was seeking novelty and just making impulsive decisions. And it's something that I can see in myself. I can see in myself a lot more easily now that I'm medicated for ADHD. Hurrah. But it's something that I have a lot of understanding of what it is to just go for an answer for something, because that gives that little reward chemical in the brain of, I made a decision, I did something, I wasn't inactive. And I think that kind of impulsivity existing in someone who has potentially as much power as Barbella does is something that I wasn't great at recognizing when it was a thing I was struggling with, but I like the idea of it being something that Barbella is a lot more in the moment aware she's doing. And it was good to verbalize that with another character and to get that out there, because I think it helped me crystallize what that aspect of Barbella is.
I'm curious how much the audience picks up on that, if they just heard that scene and just thought like, damn, paladins are swole. Or if they, if this interview is like helpful to think about the things, because it's not clear to me how people experience the show because I'm so deep in making it.
Oh,
So
yeah. It's always hard to know how much of an intention of how you play a character or do a scene is gonna translate into being perceivable by an audience. And in my head, the way I try and think about it is like, even if the specific thought that was inspiring a choice doesn't come across, I hope that by having a consistency of what I'm trying to convey, it will feel like a consistent character, and that's really all I can hope for, I think.
I've been really impressed. I mean, obviously, I'm your friend. I'm going to say nice things, but like, even just like trying to be objective, I think you've done a really impressive job with Barbella. You're kind of playing on a hard mode. Something I tell like new players of tabletop games is like, it's easier if your character has like a concrete goal they're striving towards. Like, I want the enchanted sword. I want to kill
Yeah.
someone who burned my village down. Your character has a very general interest, which can be more difficult because you have to stay very engaged and very thoughtful, and you brought that to the table. So I'm head over heels for it.
I'm really happy with Barbella as a character in that sense. Like, I've played characters with more clear, defined goals in the past, and I've loved and I've enjoyed many of those characters. It's nice sometimes to have a character that you play in the space with, where, like, because the thing I'm enjoying about Barbella, I think, is she has a lens through which she thinks about the choices presented that is inherently going to have an impact on the commitments she has and the beliefs she has. But I'm trying to also play her as someone who is not a committed's the wrong word. Not someone who feels like they fully understand their own belief system as much as they would like to, and has the confidence in their own actions that can give them. And approaching everything as not so much, my religion says I should do this, but as a question of, what do I think makes sense for me and my practice of religion, as a question, which requires a degree of me being decisive, because it could be really easy to get lost in the woods just overthinking theology on any situation that comes up. But I like the idea of being someone who's like, I don't know until a situation comes up what I'm going to think about it. I need to make those thoughts about how does this feel like it fits with my belief as the starting point. And it's been a fun challenge. It's an interesting one to do. I recognize as a DM it doesn't give you a single MacGuffin to point me at, which is... I appreciate your willingness to have me not going for the one MacGuffin, but...
Definitely. No, it's worked out, there's a lot of interesting stuff coming up, too, we can't talk about, but, like, Barbella is still going places, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
So, can't wait for people to hear that.
She has things she wants to achieve with herself, and... going on a journey is not always an easy road.
Last question about the downtimes here, sponsored by Micklewayne, Spirit of Gender, Shrug, the greater the she greater than he. The Space Fighters want Austin to review the Dresden Files RPG, and I upped my donations. Austin can have a family, and you should too. Because we're doing player-to-player downtimes, you haven't got to spend as much time with the NPCs. Are there any that you wish you could talk to more? Like, which ones are you finding interesting and you want to like dig into when you get the time?
I always enjoy the interactions with the cape arts. I don't know that there's necessarily like important room for growth stuff that I want to do. I don't have like an objective there other than just like they're fun characters. I think in terms of stuff that Barbella would like to explore more in downtimes, without saying too much, more exploration of the religious aspects of the tree, and being able
Mm.
to revisit the kind of conversation from the first downtime, with more time having passed and a very different perspective to sort of revisit. Um, Allison is definitely a character that I want to make more time to interact with, as the only other available character who is like attached to the Riddlefish religion and also still in the phase of like trying to find answers rather than feeling like they have the answers. I think there is definitely room for more interaction there that I would like to play around with.
I had no idea Allison was going to become Riddlefish pilled. I thought she could either die in that first fight, or she'd be an antagonist, or so who knows. That was all a huge surprise to me. I like that you said you want to know more about the tree stuff, though, because that does segue into one of our final questions here. Sponsored by Dust and Dark Water, Miles and Danny love Dice Funk forever, and a good Brent, unofficial Twitter bitch for Let's Talk About Snacks, which is you listen to the drink cut, as we call it here, the dry team's recordings. Has that influenced how you've been playing Barbella at all? Are you thinking to the future about possible team ups or conflict? With the space season we played, eventually the two teams combined, and with the pumpkin season coming up, the two teams are going to start as enemies, as rivals in some way at least. Are you at all thinking about that kind of stuff, or are you just like dry is dry, wet is wet, none of my business?
I think the way that Barbella likely sees the situation is that they're all part of one thing, to a degree. Any threat that threatens above is going to ultimately threaten below, and vice versa. And that the whole point of this place is that we have like a middle point between the wet and the dry that exists for those two to be a little bit symbiotic. And regardless of how much Barbella knows about what's going up on top, I think she would be of the belief that if there is a problem up top that needs help, it would be Wet Team's responsibility to find a way to help up there, and vice versa. That there is a degree of any one struggle we face is likely to be a struggle for the both. I think she's increasingly becoming invested in the people up top, even if not necessarily being invested in the events up top. The people up top are lovely. The place that is up top is important. What's going on up there? She hasn't been reading her laminated newspapers to like keep up on the events.
Well, what was the newspaper we invented? It was the Gig Gaggler or something.
Yeah. I'm trying to play Barbella as someone who wouldn't be following too closely the events up top, and as such, I'm doing my best to listen to the drink cuts while not playing into them too directly. Or at the very least, trying to lean into a deliberate reference to... Like, there are times where I will deliberately lean into something because I know that Barbella in character doesn't know it, and it would be funny for her to sort of step into a situation she doesn't know is there. I'm certainly more interested in that than trying to, like, metagame use Dry Team as, like, haha, I will avoid problems because I know they're coming up before they happen.
That's probably a healthy approach. Yeah. So, last question on our way out, sponsored by Midlife Stasis, Conduit of Inevitability, Dr. Goatman, and Francois V, a deleted scene in Everything Everywhere All at Once. We recently published the second installment in our Pokemon Revolution series. You played Porygon. Anything you want to say about that little creature and what they're up to? That was really fun. That also went in some exciting directions.
Austin, thank you for letting me break your game. Thank you for yes-anding when I wanted to break your game's mechanics entirely and completely.
It's like we played Call of Cthulhu and accidentally gave you a missile launcher.
Yeah, because, like, look, we knew going in, I like Pokemon, I know too much about Pokemon. I got a little overexcited when I realized that a thing might make sense in Pokemon lore. And I have a lot of respect for a DM who is willing to go, yeah, sure, break the mechanics, because I've been the terrified DM on the other side of oh my god, you have what stats? I very much enjoyed that character. I genuinely went in not really having an arc in mind for them of where they were going to go, and I'm glad you followed my whims of I wish to have 1,000 people in my head at once for the rest of the story.
Imagine how that sounds if you haven't listened to it. Yeah,
Yeah, go listen to it. I have 1,000 people in my head. It's fun time.
That's on the main feed and on the YouTube channel. Everything is widely available. Conrad Zimmerman and Jane drop in. It's a good time. We'll probably do more at some point. Are there any other Pokemon you're thinking about playing that you want to tease the audience about?
Oh gosh, too many options.
It's like asking a chef, are there any flavors you're into? It's like, yeah, dog, all of them. What are you talking about?
Okay, off the top of my head, I know it was only actually canon for one Ditto in one episode of the anime, but I still love the concept of the Ditto that can't do faces. And I really like the idea of doing, like, suave espionage, like James Bond-esque infiltration Ditto that is constantly having to find excuses to, like, have a hand up near the face. Or to be like, I've opened my newspaper to have a look through, because the one element just isn't working.
Infiltration Ditto is a great bit. I really like that.
Yeah, there you go. Off the top of my head, that's what I could do.
Yeah, we have to see that eventually. I don't know when, but I'm hoping to do more of those, as well as other one-shots. And then, of course, Season 12 of Dice Funk is coming. You're going to be on that one is the current plan. Very excited about all that. So thank you for joining me, first of all.
Thank you for having me. It's always lovely.
Yeah, had a lot of fun, and it's what's great about talking about Barbella is like, oh, we're only halfway through the season. It's only gonna get twice as good because there's all the results.
Oh, you all don't even know. You all don't even know.
Reaching out to catch the sun, to hold it in arms, longing for something strong, to hide our weaknesses, the light may disappear.